Hands up who's seen the new Jared Polin video about him making a mistake on a shoot. If you haven't seen it, I will link it down below. It's a fantastic video for anybody to watch. For those of you who haven't seen it, he was asked to do an engagement shoot for a TV news presenter at the TV studio, live on the set. You know, a very unusual environment to be shooting engagement photos at. And to ensure he managed to freeze the moments perfectly, he was shooting up around about 5/100ths of a second. Now, in the background of the shots, there's big TV screens that have a refresh rate of 60 Hz, which basically means if you're shooting at a shutter speed less than a 60th of a second, you're going to start to see banding in the screen from the screen refreshing. And the faster you have a shutter over a 60th of a second, the more noticeable the banding is. So in the shots that he was taking, that banding is quite noticeable. Now, the customer wasn't bothered by it, and really that is the key priority, make sure the customer is happy. But obviously, as a photographer, you're gonna kick yourself a little bit that you've not noticed that beforehand, that you've not accounted for it. Now, I will be the first to say, in that situation, I would have done exactly the same thing as him. I would have prioritized a higher shutter speed anyway. Even if I'd known about the monitors, I probably would have gone with a higher shutter speed than what the monitors would have been anyway, because with an engagement, it's a surprise. You don't know how people are going to react, and I would rather have the couple sharp and some banding on the screen than shoot below a 60th of a second and miss the moment altogether. But I digress. The key thing about this was that I was reading the comments of that video, and there was so many people all saying, you know, it's great that somebody like you in that position is willing to say that you've made a mistake, you've made an error like that, because I think a lot of people when they're first starting out in photography are kind of scared of making mistakes. And don't get me wrong, nobody wants to make mistakes, but mistakes happen. It's part and parcel of learning. That is how you progress. You make a mistake so that next time you think, hang on, that happened last time, let's avoid it. If anybody's seen the Peter McKeegan video where he tears down his own 1DX Mark II, he only did it because he broke the microphone input port on the camera, because I think he'd had the camera using it for some vlogging. He put it in the backpack on his ATV that he uses quite a lot, except he'd left the microphone plugged into the camera. So as the camera's bouncing around, it snaps the cable out of the socket, but also destroys the socket in the camera itself. As a result, the camera was useless to him, so he tore the thing down. But both of those were caused by the smallest of oversight from even the most experienced photographers. So I want to put this video together in the hope that more photographers will share their mistakes and their misjudgments, so that anybody that's starting out in photography will see that no amount of experience makes you impervious to making mistakes. I know I have had more than my fair share. Some have been fairly negligible, some have been almost catastrophic. And at the end of the day, you make a mistake, you do the best you can with what you've got, and you work around it to your potential. I've done things before where I've forgotten to change settings, so I've maybe been shooting indoors, gone outside, forgot to change one of my settings over, so suddenly I've got a picture that's stupidly overexposed. I've done it before where I've accidentally caught a dial, so I've been shooting outdoors, caught a dial that's changed the settings, not noticed it when I've took the first picture, and I've got a picture that's stupidly underexposed. I've done it before shooting motorsports where I've wanted to get some blur into the motion, so I've slowed the shutter speed down. Next thing, there's a big pile up that happens, and I just, you know, you can't react quick enough to change your settings. You just go with what you've got. But I have made even bigger mistakes. I've done it before going out on casual shoots where I forgot to even check if there was a battery in the camera, or I've gone out and forgotten my memory cards. I've been out to shoots before with all the camera gear and the laptop and forgot to take either a card reader or a cable, so I've got no way of getting the pictures off the camera onto the computer, so I've had to actually leave the shoot and go and buy a card reader. I have even been caught out by the 30-minute video limit on DSLRs, so I've had a B-roll camera setup running for kind of external shots while I move around and completely lost track of time and suddenly remembered that the thing had stopped recording 5 minutes ago, so you suddenly miss a section of the video out, but you just kind of work around that in an edit as best you can. My absolute favorite for worst mistake I have ever made, if I ever go to film a wedding or something like that, generally I try to carry 3 cameras with me. I'll have 2 B-roll cameras that I can set up static throughout the day, and then I'll have the main camera that I carry around to capture the different moments, so you can kind of jump between all 3. However, in one particular instance, I'd got everything together the night before. You know, you always think, get everything ready the night before while your mind's fresh, you can go over everything, you're not rushing around. Except I couldn't quite fit everything in the one backpack I had, because that pretty much just fits all my normal camera gear, the 2 bodies and all the lenses. So the 3rd body I couldn't fit in the bag. So when I took it all downstairs, camera bag, camera body, tripods, whatever else I need, got it all in the car, left the 3rd camera body sitting on my settee. Only realised when I got to the venue and suddenly realised that I was missing a camera body. But at that instance, nothing you can really do apart from make do with what you got. So nobody is impervious from making mistakes. If you are just starting out in photography, don't be afraid of making mistakes. Obviously, don't intend to make mistakes, but just be sure that mistakes are going to happen. You just need to recognise them, recognise what went wrong, and make sure that when you next come across that same situation, you remember what you need to do, because that is how you learn. Something happens, it doesn't go to plan, you think, right, next time this is what I need, and you will. You will make a mistake, there is no question about it. Every single photographer on the planet has made mistakes. Every single photographer to this day probably at some point has an oversight, because even with more experience and you know what to do with, sometimes you just get complacent and you think, yeah, I've done this 100 times, I know what I'm doing, and miss the most obvious of things. Maybe we could get this going viral with, you know, hashtag my worst mistake or something. But what is your worst mistake? Leave your comment down below so that anybody watching this in the future can see that they're not the only ones who make mistakes. And, you know, these things do happen. You just live with them. But thanks for stopping by, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video.